So I'm going to put up welcome to everyone. I'm going to put up the text that we'll start with. Let's see. Where are we here? Okay. Everyone with me here?
Yep.
So so we've been spending several weeks ever since Hashem Elohim said, Lo tov heyot adam, it's not good. We discussed what does it mean when we say lo tov. The Ramban said something specific that we'll discuss a little bit more today. What man is alone, what does that mean? And then it switched to the language. Instead of vayitzer, it went to eser, I will make, which we've been saying is complete. And this ezer kenegdo, the possibilities of a mate opposite him, a soulmate, a helper, a guider opposite of him, that would be for him forever. And then we said, we're asking the question now, okay, he made man from the earth, he made the animals from the earth. Why didn't he make the wife from the earth? And that's where we're going to work today. So today's pasuk is this one, 21. Vayapel Hashem Elokim tardema al ha'adam vayishan. So first, this is the first time we have what the Ibn Ezra calls in his time the diktuk of lashon kaved, which we call hif'il, right? So God caused man, right, to fall asleep. So vayapel Hashem Elokim tardema. We have three lishonot of shena, of sleeping in Hebrew. We have resh dalid mem, that's the tardema. We have vayishan, and he slept. And then we have one more. We have lanum. Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. So we have three languages for sleeping. We're going to see, I think, in the Mefarshim today, that tardema, there's levels of tardema. You could have levels of sleep, and one of the levels of tardema can be nivuah, can be prophecy. But then they ask, okay, why didn't it stop? Vayapel Hashem Elokim tardema al adam, caused him to fall asleep. Why didn't it just stop there? Vayishan, why did they add Vayishan, and he slept? And so there's a certain nurturing there, that if there's a fear of going to sleep at night, Hashem helped him practice going to sleep so that there would be no fear of sleep. And then it says Vayikach. This is the first time that we have Vayikach, Achat mitzalotov, one of his sides. And now another new word that we've never seen, and the Mefarshim will talk about it today, Vayizgor basar tachtena. So he closed the flesh underneath it, right at there, or the translator here says at that site. So what does it mean? And he closed. Why did he use vayizgur? So before we do that, though, I want us to continue our study in depth here, and I want to start with the Or HaChaim, who I think we should incorporate more. I know we've been focusing on the on the Ramban. The Or HaChaim is Chaim ben Attar, who lived at the end of the 1600s. So he's an 18th century guy. I think he died in Jerusalem, I think, around 1743. Came from Morocco. Most of his rabbinate was in Morocco, from a famous family there. So here he's going to, and then I wanted to start with him. I was telling Jeff, as we were waiting for everyone to get on, there's a certain more modern tone to his thing. And then I want to go back to the Talmidim of the Ramban that are uncomfortable with the Ramban's approach that we have talked about. So I'll read now. Vayomer Hashem Elokim lo tov. Great, God said, it is not good for man to be alone. This is difficult, since God had mentioned already on the day he created man that the species has been created male and female. That's the previous parak. Another problem in the text is the expression e'eseh, I shall make for him a helpmate. The Torah then immediately proceeds to describe that the mammals and the birds were formed. Vayitzer, use a different language, right? Formed. This gives the impression that God intended one of these animals to be man's helpmate. Such a thought is not only extremely strange, but if true, it would also result in one of those animals being deprived of its own mate. So he's just musing here. What does the text mean? What's the pshat here? How do we relate this pasuk to the first chapter? Besides, why did God have to put Adam to sleep and to remove part of his body? That's the question. Why did he create Eve in this manner? Could he not have formed woman as dust from the earth? Let's not say dust, as earth from the soil, as he had formed him, man himself, especially since he formed Eve on the very same day. He formed Adam, Zachar Keva Bra'am. So now I should have shown you this pasuk, because we go in chapter 5 here in Bereishit, and it's like we're going back to chapter 1. Like chapter 5 is the sister chapter of chapter 1. So what exactly is going on here? Our sages have given many homiletical explanations. That's why we started this all off. We went to Brachot 61 because the Ramban took his cue from there. But they have not provided us with the pshat, straightforward answers that justify the text as it stands. We may have to fall back on the opinions expressed in Brachot 61, that originally man was created with two faces in one body. The Talmud there offers two options as to what was removed from Adam, a tail or a face, respectively, or a side, I would say, respectively. This is reasonable explanation because it justifies Hashem's blessing, God's blessings or command to Adam to be fruitful and to multiply at a time when women had not yet been reported as a separate entity. So I want to remind everyone, the Ramban said even in the current state, they could reproduce in that sense because of the Pru Urvu in the first chapter. Okay, he continues on here a bit though. It is in keeping with Hashem's propensity for preparing everything good ahead of time and providing many more opportunities for man to do good than evil. However, we must ask why he separated the two bodies, enabling Eve to fall victim to the temptation by the serpent. So he's getting ahead of us, and already in bringing us into chapter 3 already. This leads us to examine the cause of Adam/Eve's sin. What happened to him and all of mankind as a result? We have found that woman became the cause of all that the world lost because the serpent prevailed over her in a match of wits. This occurred because Adam was not at her side at the time of Eve's encounter with the serpent. So I'm going to continue reading. I'm not going to invoke my understanding of what he's saying. I want to discuss this. But when he talks about Ezer Kenegdo, they have to make big decisions side by side. This was a decision that Eve made, not side by side, and she made the wrong decision. So she ate it, and then she gave Adam. Now, as a result, another version, this occurred because Adam was not at her side at the time of Eve's encounter with the serpent. Now, he was asleep as a result of having had marital relations with his wife. That's the Midrash. Another Midrash suggests that Hashem took him on a tour of the earth, because the question is, where's Adam? Right? Where's Adam? Right? As a result, the serpent encountered Eve on her own and succeeded in seducing her. If the Torah had reported man's creation and the subsequent separation of Eve's body sequentially without interpolating Adam's experiences on earth in the interval, many people would have argued that what happened was all God's fault. So this is something we're going to discuss more when we get to chapter 3. can we make that claim? They would have said that if God had not separated her body from that of her husband, thereby making a drastic change in what he had created originally, the serpent would never have had a chance to seduce Eve. In order to forestall such an argument, the Torah tells us, first, the reason that God separated Eve's body from Adam's in answer to Adam's own request. So now he's developing a slightly, we said that the Ramban was comfortable saying that Hashem modified his plan. He was comfortable with that. And his Talmidim that we're going to read in a minute aren't so comfortable. But now the Or HaChaim comes up with another idea that man was interacting with Hashem about his needs. And therefore, this happened this way. This idea in answer to Adam's own request. The first time I've come across this approach. His observations of how the animals had lived, male and female, as separate bodies, had made him desirous of a similar arrangement. God had only the best of intentions as usual. This is also the reason the Torah told us already at the outset that man was equipped to procreate from the moment he was created, just like the Ramban said. Being one and the same body obviously had some of the same disadvantages as being a Siamese twin. God therefore decided it would be better for man's helpmates to be kinegdo, an appropriate complement separate from him, rather than the other half of his body. In this way, she could be a help to him at all times instead of being a hindrance on occasion. Eve, being a separate body, was not dictated by Adam's need to procreate. That's what we've been saying all along. Seeing the separation her body served only to please Adam, we must ask why none of the other creatures could have been trained to perform that task for Adam while leaving Eve in the state she had been created. The Torah therefore describes in verses 19 and 10 that Adam did indeed search for a suitable helpmate amongst all the creatures, but did not find one that was acceptable to him. Naming the animals, which is something we talked about last week, identifying their essence was part of that search for a suitable helpmate. Eve's existence as a separate body from Adam had therefore become mandatory from Adam's point of view. It is totally incorrect to blame God for subsequent developments, such as Eve's finding herself temporarily alone or facing an evil influence whose existence she had been quite unaware of. The Torah's report about both Adam and Eve's innocence, their lack of shame at being nude, are all facts the Torah supplies that enable us to better understand the causes that led to the sin. Human relationships are based on people facing each other, kinegdo. The Torah describes Adam's profound joy when he finally beheld the partner who up until then had been hidden from him, had faced backwards. From God's point of view, the original arrangement was perfectly acceptable. He had not created an imperfect human species. Any change was entirely in response to Adam's frame of mind to accommodate him. Our sages had supplied us with numerous reasons why God did not create an entirely new human being to serve as Adam's helpmate. When Solomon told us in Kohelet, Tovim Eshnayim Min Echad, that two are better than one, that they can help each other, this has nothing to do with God's having created man's form in such a way that he could have impregnated his wife, which was part of him, but facing back. Okay? So again, he's struggling with why did Hashem's plan change? So he's bringing this approach that it changed as a result of interaction with Adam, and then anything that became subsequently out of it that was negative is the result of Adam and Chava's own choices. Now, perhaps the objective reason Hashem had created...
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's actually why I raised my hand, because he said that they gave numerous explanations, but he doesn't bring any of them. And I think that the most famous one is Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi's performance of roasting a steak with ashes and all kinds of other gory details to prove to the daughter of Caesar or emperor or whatever he was that's why Hashem put Adam to sleep, that he would have been disgusted if he saw the process while being awake.
Good, thank you. And now I see the hand raised. I have my nose in the text. I
That's
see how it
okay.
works now.
That's
Thank you. Thank you for that. And this is going to get iterated a little bit because the Talmidim of the Ramban go back to Masechet Brachot. So where are we? Perhaps the objective reason Hashem had created the human species as a pair in a single body was to distinguish between the functions of the bodies of the animals and the functions of the human being. That's interesting. Animals mate indiscriminately. A male will mate with any female available to him, the act of mating being merely a response to biological urges. The fact that the Torah on occasion stresses Zachar Unekeva element when mentioning animals as pairs, such as when they enter the ark, does not mean that they have exclusive partners. The average animal does not recognize a female of its species as specifically his female. This is not the way God wanted man to relate, to the subject of mating. It would have been impossible for Adam to describe his wife as basar mibsari, flesh of my own, were it not for the fact that Eve had been part of his own body previously. The whole idea that man's zivug, his coupling, is arranged in heaven would have been impossible to understand, but for the fact that the female of the species is considered man's other half. This consideration may also be the reason that when the Torah legislated forbidden sexual relations, the subject is always the male. It is forbidden to engage in sexual intercourse with certain women as they could not possibly be your missing half. So to summarize some thoughts, if when we were reading this previously, we said there's an evolution of man's place in the world. He needed the helper, but first he had to name the animals. And by naming the animals, he got to know them, their essence, to take responsibility for working with them. And then now comes the psukim, the verses that we're going to see about him and his mate and him and his wife that also try to indicate a certain discovery, a certain mating, a certain spiritual, right, half soul kind of thing, almost resulting. Resulting in, right, in a poem almost, in Adam with his joy bursting in, and we'll come back to these verses next week. Vayomer Adam zot hapam. Remember when we said the Ramban said zot? Zot is a special word of secrets. Zot hapam. This is the time. Etzem me'atzamai, a bone from my bones, ubasar mibsari, and flesh from my flesh. Lezot yikare isha. This shall be called a woman because she is taken from the man. So here we have verse. So the Torah takes us. Here we have Zot Aisha, and the Torah ends on Zot HaBracha. So we see a special spiritual place. Now I want to go back though to the Talmidim of the Ramban and how they say or don't say something similar to the Orach Chaim or to the Ramban. So this first part that we're going to read tonight, I'm sorry that we're going to go long. I apologize. Because we still have, well, we'll do what we can. So here's the Rabbeinu Bachya, who's going to first summarize his teacher. He's going to summarize the Ramban, I think. Up until this point, the Torah had mentioned each time it was good, seeing that the good in question referred to the continued existence of the various species God had created. So it's something kiyumi, something existential, we said in the Ramban. In the case of Adam, who was unable to procreate, seeing he did not have a mate, the Torah had to describe the state as lotov. The meaning of the verse is it is not good for the man. It is not good that the man and the woman remain attached to each other like Siamese twins, one body with two heads. This is what the sages meant when they said in Brachot 61 that the human species was created as a body with two heads, seeing that the Torah testified that God had created them, Zachar Nekeva, male and female. Their body was so constructed that it possessed both male and female genitals. This sounds familiar. The reason it sounds familiar is because it is the Ramban. The second head assisted the first head in achieving the act of procreation. This is the reason that when God separated the bodies, he referred to the new body as the one which had previously been an automatic Ezer helpmate to become an Ezer Kenegdo, a transition from an attached helpmate to a helpmate which corresponded to him, an independent person with independent willpower. Now that this is the Rabbeinu Bachya. If we are to accept this interpretation by Ramban, we would have to attribute to Hashem a complete change of mind from what he had planned originally when he created Adam. It is quite unacceptable to attribute such a change of mind to God. Now, we were comfortable with that because we just said that it's the evolution of man. But now let's give Rabbeinu Bachya and his teacher airtime. The fact is that the words, "It is not good that Adam be alone," reported in our verse, were not spoken by God after he had created Adam, but already prior to God actually having created Adam, when the plan to create Adam had been conceived by God. As soon as Hashem entertained that thought, he added that it was not suitable that man should be the only type of inhabitant of earth, just as the angels are the only inhabitants of the celestial regions. Rather, just as the other creatures in our terrestrial universe were created in pairs and reproduced themselves, so Adam too should have a partner, and he and she would reproduce and be subject to death, as are all other creatures in our lower world. At this point in the narrative, the Torah reports on the creation of woman. The fact that her raw materials was identical to that of Adam, as God took one of Adam's sides to construct her body. There is no question of reconsideration by God of his original design in planning man. So that seemed to be important to the Talmidim of the Ramban. I think when we just read the verses ourselves, we weren't quite as concerned about that. Let's keep going. In Brachot 61, Rabbi Avau addressed the apparent contradictions by the words male and female. He created them, whereas in Genesis 1:27, the Torah reported he created him, bara oto. The meaning is bara otam, I think it says. The meaning is that originally God had planned to create man and woman separately, whereas upon further reflection, he created them in a single body. The fact is that we observe that ultimately God carried out his original plan of creating two separate human bodies, a male and a female one. This gives the impression as if Rabbi Avau thought that God had indeed reconsidered and changed his desire. My wise teacher, Reb Shlomo Aderet, so that's the Rashba, who was also a student of the Ramban, both of them were, may his soul rest in peace, wrote that this matter has to be approached from two separate aspects, each one of which is true and accurate. When Rabbi Avau said that originally God planned to create man as two separate bodies, male and female, just like the animals, this must not be taken at face value. All allegorical statements were never expected to be taken at face value, but were meant to help us understand abstract matters by explaining them in terms of phenomena we are familiar with. So I want to say here that he's greatly disagreeing with the Ramban, who wants to stay close to the text here physically, and he's prepared to abstract this. Rabbi Avu wanted to illustrate that God planned to create the species of man in the most perfect manner possible. And this is why he spoke about God entertaining different thoughts at different times in order for the eventual translation of those thoughts into creative action to reflect that man's creation had been well planned down to the last detail. When he spoke about God's originally planning to create two separate human beings, he wanted to explain to us that God wanted both man and woman to be independent personalities who would at the same time draw on each other for support. He meant for us to picture the function of the male and the female of the species to be similar to the relationship between sun and moon, for instance. Having given due consideration to these factors, God decided that it was not good that man, the crown jewel of his creation, should be the only active factor in the universe, whereas the woman should be no more than a receptacle, a servant, just like the moon, which only acts as a receptacle for the sun's rays. That is why Rabbi Avau said that on further consideration, God decided to create man with a single body, the male. So here he's saying that the relationship between man and female, between male and female, couldn't be anything but equal and self-reinforcing and self-giving, that both radiate and both receive, not like the sun and the moon. However, although the female eventually was separated from him and they became two bodies, the female is not considered as having been a separate act of creation, as she was formed from matter which was peripheral to Adam, meaning from his body, seeing that he survived as an entity, although the part the woman was made of was removed from him. This is why some sages have described the woman as being made of man's tail. Another way he's going to take this too, of Rabbi Avau in Brachot, goes as follows. When God contemplated creating man and woman as two separate bodies, his concern was that they should be male and female just like all the other animals. On the other hand, it was important to God that woman should be perceived as being made of the very same raw material as her husband, thus creating a natural affinity between man and wife, not unlike the animals. As a result, woman would be viewed by her husband as if she were one of his very own limbs. Thus far, the words of my revered teacher. So I think that we've come around full circle, and I think we've come around to read how we first read it ourselves, that both Adam's encounter with the animals and his encounter with his wife was a way of him to evolve into relationship and into his place in the world, and ultimately so that he could feel, or they both can feel, that the union of man and wife, the union of man and wife was something very, very special. So I'm actually.
Can I interject something?
Please, please.
If you go back in the text, woman isn't taken from man's side until after Adam has given names.
Right.
Okay, so I'm thinking that language has to be a part of the relationship between Adam and Isha, and that is what's going to distinguish this unique relationship from, Adam would not have been able to have that kind of relationship with any of these other animals if he had considered them a helpmeet. So once language comes into play, then you can have a more sophisticated and, as we keep saying, an equal relationship between the two of them.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So we have a decision to make now. Decision is the clock.